Warning! This chapter contains adult content, so I will be recording that in a separate video for members only. If you wish to read the chapter in its entirety, please visit the link in the descriptions. The Syntax of Things by Arisha. Chapter 63, parentheses, on birds and bees. Severus had learned long ago that old sins always came home to roost. One could lock the door, nail up the windows, stuff the wall cracks, and hang some pretty painting over them. One of a summer scenery, perhaps, with the ladies sweating under their rustling dresses, looking desperately gloomy or vaguely fatigued, a dog or two running astray to the back door of a cozy cottage near the river, the men smoking their pipes, and the children playing on a tablecloth laid on the bright green grass. One could try. But behind the painting, the cracks would spread, and under the planks that hid the windows, the glass would shatter and invite the wind in. The door would remain locked, but through the gap beneath it, the sins would find their way in unbothered, unchanged by time, and untouched by guilt and sorrow. It made sense ending up back where they belonged. One could always look at the nice painting as they devoured him. Guilt and sorrow meant nothing. They were impotent, entirely ineffectual. To think of what could have been, to repent for what had been done instead. A waste of time, all of it, little thoughts powerless against the demons inhabiting one's soul. In times like these, only the heartless and the lucky ones survived. The rest of them would have to kindly screw themselves. Or switch sides. Because in times like these, people were willing to do what they normally wouldn't. And so in times like these, Severus always chose to get wasted. One thing was certain, Severus's sins never gave up on him. So, when he heard a knock on his door, just a bit after midnight, he wasn't surprised. And however habitual it was, he couldn't help but wonder as he opened the door and glared at the incredulous brat looking up at him confidently. You! His astonishment lasted a moment. Then it was all natural again. What do you want?
Can I come in?
Damn him, somehow this was Severus's fault. What for?
Can I come in first?
Unlikely. Ironic how Harry had chosen this particular night for his new debut, though. Severus was deranged at what the mechanisms people cruelly called fate withheld. Right now, he was sure a math problem was hiding behind this, one he wouldn't care to solve even if he had the time.
Look, even if you're going to take points or report me, just for my bothering to walk all the way down here, you should at least hear me out first.
He should not do a goddamn fucking thing. He had no obligations to anyone, and there was not a single little reason he should do anything for Harry Potter. In this room, Severus had the right to decide and declare that nothing existed. But Severus was not sober enough to tell him so. Scanning the corridor with his eyes, he moved his head in a get-in fashion and secured the door behind them. Harry needn't be told where to sit. He looked up nervously from the couch, and Severus refused to sneer at the hypocritical modesty the boy had grown to show off over the past month. He had come back. Severus would have grunted were he not afraid a shit ton of whiskey would emerge from his mouth. Harry eyed the bottles on the table, but didn't comment on them. For his own good, Severus returned to the couch and leaned back, waiting for the next performance of terrors to begin. Talk.
Look, I wouldn't have come if it wasn't important. I promise this is the last time I knock on your door. I just want to tell you a few things, and then I won't bother you ever again.
Severus nodded impatiently for him to continue. He mentally crossed his fingers for this to end within the next minute or two, and for him to have sobered up before dawn. Otherwise, he would have to explain to Dumbledore that he had failed to kill him, for he had gotten pissed while trying to forget that he was going to. It occurred to him that the boy was talking, and he tried to catch up. Too late.
So for that, I'm sorry.
He waited a few minutes, and then realized that he had probably missed the entirety of what he suspected was a rather extended apology. Harry looked at him expectantly, and Severus was startled by his sudden impulse to laugh. He successfully bit it down, watching Harry struggle to figure out what Severus thought about the matter. Sadism wasn't that bad after all, and as he couldn't bring himself to care enough to request a repetition of the speech, he simply groaned,
Is that all? You're drunk, aren't you?
Not nearly. Enough. A sharp breath escaped him, and he hopelessly looked around for a glass. None in sight. It looked like he'd have to continue drinking straight from the bottle.
I thought you'd at least say something.
5 points from everywhere. There, get lost.
Fine, I don't suppose anything I say ever matters to you, but you should get help. You can't continue like this. You're drinking too much. You're becoming exactly what you say you despise.
No shit. Is that all, Potter?
No, not really.
Bugger. This couldn't get worse, could it?
To be honest, the reason I came is to say goodbye.
Alright, good. Why are you leaving? There was a sharp pain in Severus's temple, and he felt the dizziness overtake him. He noticed his bottle being suspiciously out of reach again, but he couldn't recall Harry moving it.
I came to end this. To tell you you can live in peace now. You don't have to worry. I'll stay away. I wanted to tell you. In person. I should never have pushed you, and I didn't understand that it was wrong. That I shouldn't have. I have a stupid habit, right? Following my heart. And yet all I've accomplished is lengthen the list of people who died because they were standing in the way to me. I understand why you did everything you did. I understand you made a promise to protect me, but if you care, even a little bit, I need you to stop protecting me now.
Fumbling through his cloak, he fished out a folded piece of paper. It was a Daily Prophet page, and Severus could guess exactly which one. Death Eater attack targets muggles.
If anything happens to you,
Harry shook his head.
I'll leave you alone. I can't risk anything happening to anyone again because of me, not if I can stop it. So please stop trying to protect me or to look after me, and stay away too.
The teenage drama had suddenly gotten too much. Get out of here for God's sake. Severus clamped his mouth shut to restrain his rage and immediately realized he needed to vomit. The boy was somehow still talking, so Severus motioned at him to go and hurried to his bedroom to reach his private bathroom. He banged the door closed and collapsed next to the toilet, his knees hitting the floor hard. Closing his eyes was pretty much another roller coaster to hell. I came to say goodbye, to tell you to stop protecting me. Lies. He wasn't here for that. He wasn't here for any of these absurdities. He'd have visited during his office hours, if that was ever the case. His stomach contracted so violently he spat blood too. He rested his elbows on the toilet lid and breathed hard. He couldn't face Harry tonight. He couldn't bear it. Why expose himself to more tragedies? Why sulk in the misery that life was? He needed a way out of what he didn't know. A way out of everything. For the sake of his own shivery sanity, he should just wipe his own memory and disappear. Find himself a nice back alley bench and wait there with no wand and no further ambitions until he succumbed to frostbite or simply perished from hunger. Please. How greedy he was to ask for more, to dare want anything at all. Even his own death. Gods, he was pathetic. As pathetic as Harry's goodbyes, perhaps. The boy deserved to be slapped for his lack of touch with reality. The anger boiling inside him fumed and insisted that Harry shouldn't be happy ever. This was all his fault. He should have never been born. James's fault, then. Breathe. It wasn't strange that Harry had wormed his way into these rooms again, but it was unnerving. Where was the Gryffindor honesty now? Crouched behind goodbyes. Dumbledore hadn't accepted to see him earlier either. Severus wanted to talk to him about anything, really. Just one more time. One last time. But apparently Dumbledore didn't find it necessary. Severus had stood there for a while like an idiot, repeated the password 3 times, then a 4th one, but the gargoyle never moved and the staircase never appeared. So this was it. He had nothing to care about losing anymore, and he would never talk to Dumbledore again. He would never talk to this foolish boy again, either. He washed his face and mouth, letting the cold water sober him up as he fumbled through his cabinet for any potion that would mend the vertigo. When he was sure he could balance his weight again, he walked to his bedroom, only to find Harry waiting for him. Why are you still here?
Are you feeling sick? What's wrong?
Most things, I believe.
Severus.
Why are you here, Harry?
I told you I came to ask you to...
Liar! Harry was taken aback at that, and Severus crossed the distance between them slowly. Why are you really here? What the hell do you want from me?
Right. I should leave you alone.
Severus grabbed his arm before he could reach the door. You should have left me alone years ago. I believe it's a little too late now. His last thread of self-control snapped. Severus leaned down. His throat burned, and he moved so fast that he hardly had time to close his eyes before pulling Harry close and kissing him until he thought he was going to die. When they broke apart, it was only for a moment. Severus pulled Harry to him again and felt him yield a little under the shock. He mentally sneered at the warmth spreading inside him as Harry moaned softly. You have caused my life complete and utter chaos, he distantly thought as all his doubts trailed down to nothing and his hand locked at Harry's nape. In the thunderous silence of the dimly lit room, Harry grunted in frustration against his mouth, and Severus hurried to continue the kiss, pushing him back to the bed before any protests could take place, and then pinned him down with his own body. A hand pushed hard against his chest, and Severus squeezed Harry's wrist firmly, stilling it. When Harry failed to free his hand, he broke the kiss and glared up darkly.
You're drunk.
I'm drunk, I'm stupid, I'm happy, I love you, Severus murmured, hoping against all hope that Harry would remember the time he'd told Severus exactly the same. Harry jerked under him, turning his face away from Severus's kisses.
Stop. No,
he whispered, his voice cold.
When you sober up.
Severus cupped his face, kissing his cheek, his nose, the corner of his lips.
When you...
He jerked again, wriggling his leg free and kicking at the mattress with his shoe.
When...
If you leave me now, I'll die, Severus said, and Harry stopped fighting. He looked up at him with wide green eyes, and even after all their endless months of practice, the boy's emotions were all there on the surface. So obvious, so painfully clear. First the reluctance and the unwillingness, and then suddenly the tenderness, the lust, the impatience.
You...
Harry grunted, finally yanking his hand away.
Sorry, bastard.
He pushed Severus off him and straddled him, kissing him back almost violently. His short, hushed breaths tasted of mistrust, or even anger, perhaps. But Severus wrapped his arms around him and held him close. They rolled on top of each other again and again, Harry releasing his bewilderment and exasperation with low moans right into Severus's mouth. Looking back, Severus could safely say that he had never lived. He'd never been to the beach, had never traveled, never perfected his spells or mastered alchemy or wrote a book. Never did anything muggle either, like drive a car or skate or play a board game. There was a whole world out there full of experiences, and Severus had never touched it. All chance of any of that was gone now. He didn't have time. If he was to live, to get the glimpse of what life was, what freedom was, this was his only chance. He kissed Harry's neck and bit down hard, digging his teeth into random spots of skin as his tongue darted out to taste it. Harry grasped a handful of his hair and pulled. This was predestined, he was sure. A deed of divine will, a distorted circumstance of holy justice, that or simply God's revenge. As old as time, careful what you wish for, this time embodied by a kiss and another and another. Harry's temporary state of embarrassment faded too soon, and Severus allowed himself to abandon every resistance as Harry's hands worked on the buttons of his shirt. He couldn't bring himself to care about the wrongness, the improperness of it. Not this time, not now. Total debauchery it was. An irrefutable sheer collapse of his morality, his principles, his belief. An act drenched in filthiness to its very core, vulgar and raw and foul and eternally unforgivable. But none of that bothered Severus now, though. Desperate as he was to pretend that none of this was ever real, he'd never noticed how relaxed Harry's face was when flushed like that. Harry was awakened by a hand kindly shaking his shoulder. Harry, he grunted faintly and covered his eyes with an arm. You have to leave. Wake up.
Time?
He murmured, fumbling around for his glasses. Severus pushed them into his hand. It's 4. You should get back to the tower before anyone notices.
I'll go in the morning.
It is morning. Potter.
You just called me Harry a moment ago.
The blanket was violently pulled away from him in the chilling cold of the dungeon detective.
Hey!
Oh, ouch! Only you, drawled Severus, could manage to fall from the bed at the age of 17.
It doesn't even count. You pushed me.
Did not, insisted Severus as he headed to the bathroom. Harry looked around at the mess they had made last night, still having trouble believing everything that had happened. Yawning, he got up to his feet and searched for his clothes. His jeans were behind the bed, and he found his shirt under the pillow. His left shoe had somehow ended up inside an open drawer, and the right one was on the rug under Severus's coat. He stepped into his jeans tiredly, all the while fighting the temptation to lay back down and sleep again. His shirt was stained all over by that slimy lotion thing, and Harry tossed it on the bed a bit disgusted. His bladder full and his backside still sore, he dragged his feet to the bathroom and all but threw his weight on Severus's back, wrapping his arms around his waist. Severus, who was brushing his teeth, placed his toothbrush aside and turned on the faucet.
"Are you still in pain?" he asked him.
"No," said Harry, pressing his face between Severus's shoulder blades.
"You smell like sweat,"
he murmured. "I told you to get dressed," Severus said, drying his face with a towel. "Where is your shirt?"
"Somewhere,"
Harry replied.
"I'm sleepy."
"Get dressed," Severus repeated coldly, pushing Harry off him and storming out of the bathroom. A lazy whine escaped Harry's lips, and he collapsed on the toilet seat, too tired to piss standing up. He blinked at his lap as he struggled to unzip his jeans again, and nearly had a dream right then and there. He washed his face, gargled, his mouth went through Snape's cabinet in hopes of finding anything interesting, then gargled again. The sour flavor was still there, stuck on his tongue. It felt nasty and gross.
"It's Saturday,"
Harry pointed out when he returned to the bedroom. Severus was now fully dressed, pushing his drawers back at Blaze.
"No classes, I mean. Everyone's gonna sleep in."
"Hogs mean trip, Potter," Severus said, sounding as distant and irate as always. "Did you forget?" Harry stared, the word Potter suddenly tying his stomach into a tight knot. He pushed himself to sound unbothered.
"Oh, right. I don't think I'll go. I can barely keep my eyes open."
Severus banged the last drawer close, so violently Harry thought the floor throbbed along. "You will go," Severus hissed, finally looking at him. It wasn't surprising that his eyes were unreadable again, that his tone was sharp like a knife. He'd regretted it, of course he had. "You were the one who claimed this would never affect anything. Prove it!" Harry nodded, not knowing what to say. Severus fished his invisibility cloak from under the bed and threw it over Harry's shoulders, pushing him to the door.
"Have you changed your mind?"
Harry asked, at last needing to know. Severus sighed, his hand on the doorknob. "Several times in my life, yes." I don't." And Severus kissed him. His hands held Harry's head firmly in place as Harry wrapped an arm around Severus's neck.
"Goodbye,"
Severus whispered.
"Bye,"
said Harry, smiling against Severus's lips. It occurred to Severus that he liked being a person. He remained unmoving, fingers clutched on the sink's edges, eyes locked with his own pathetic reflection in the mirror, and allowed his heart to soften as Harry embraced him and kissed his shoulder. If love was to destroy, to be loved was certainly to be the one destroyed. He'd have that from now on. The destruction. He'd have it tonight, coming back here alone, with his colleagues hating him and his students hating him and the boy hating him. He'd have it at the sight of his tarnished bedsheets and at the tingle on his back where Harry's nails had marked him. It'd mean the world were things different. Pity that he was already marked. He'd have nothing from now on. He'd relish in dejection, for there was nothing else that he deserved. "Get dressed," Severus told him for what felt like the 10th time, feeling dirty and impossibly corrupted. For what he'd done, for what he was going to. Severus was in the middle of erasing all evidence of the boy's presence in his rooms when he became aware of Harry mumbling something about Saturdays and sleep. "Hags mean trip, Potter," he said, deranged, banishing the lotion bottle and scourgifying the mattress twice. "Did you forget?" He wasn't interested in the answer. There were things to be done, and he needed to be alone. He couldn't be distracted now. He needed all his attention, disciplined and aimed at the forthcoming task. The words, "Don't think I'll go," tickled the edge of his mind, and he nearly lost it. "You will go!" he yelled, surprised at his own lack of control. "You were the one who claimed this would never affect anything. Prove it!" There was no room for mistakes anymore. No room for compromises. They'd reached the edge of the cliff, and time was only speeding up. The possibility of Harry trapped in the castle during the attack made Severus grit his teeth at his own idiocy to have the boy stay up all night when he knew he'd need strength today. He'd have no way to escape if he stayed back. He needed to be somewhere he could apparate.
"Have you changed your mind?"
Harry asked at last, his eyes fixed on the floor, embarrassment kicking in at last. "Several times in my life, yes." I don't. There was a deep kiss, and then nothing. When the door closed behind Harry, Severus knew he had lost him.